They say you should never touch a dragon's treasure. But what happens when you accidentally save the dragon's heart? One freezing night in Brooklyn, Sienna Miller jumped into the East River to save a drowning woman. She didn't know the woman was the mother of Dante Cavallo, the most ruthless capo in the New York underworld. She thought she was a hero. She was wrong. Now Dante isn't just grateful he's obsessed. He says a life for a life means she belongs to him now. And in his world, belonging isn't a choice. It's a life sentence. This is the story of how a good deed turned into a deadly obsession. The rain in New York City didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Sienna Miller adjusted the strap of her canvas bag, her knuckles white as she gripped her umbrella against the biting November wind. It was 11:45 p.m. Her shift at St. Jude's Medical Center had run 2 hours late, and her usual bus route had been detoured due to construction on the Brooklyn Bridge. Now she was walking the long way home along the Dumbo waterfront, the East River churning violently to her left, black and restless like spilled ink. She was tired, bone tired. Her student loans were overdue. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, was threatening eviction if she didn't come up with an extra $200 by Friday, and her nursing scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic and despair. "Just keep walking, Sienna," she muttered to herself, stepping over a puddle that reflected the neon glow of the Manhattan skyline across the water. Left foot, right foot, bed. She was passing the old Pier 4 docks, an area usually fenced off for renovation by Victoria Shipping, a massive logistics firm that everyone in the neighborhood knew was a front for something else. When she heard it, it wasn't a scream, it was a splash, a heavy, sickening sound of something substantial hitting the freezing water. Sienna stopped. The wind howled, tearing at her umbrella. She squinted through the driving rain toward the edge of the pier. A black luxury sedan, a Mercedes Maybach with tinted windows, was speeding away from the scene, tires screeching on the wet cobblestones. Its taillights vanished around the corner of Water Street. "Hello," Sienna called out, her voice swallowed by the storm. Silence. Then, a faint thrashing sound. Sienna dropped her umbrella. Instinct took over, the same instinct that made her an excellent ER nurse. She ran to the edge of the pier, grabbing the rusted railing. Down below, in the swirling, freezing current, a figure was bobbing. A woman. She was struggling, her heavy wool coat dragging her down into the abyss. "Help!" The voice was weak, choked with water. Sienna didn't think. She didn't consider the freezing temperature or the dangerous current. She kicked off her sneakers, vaulted over the railing, and dove. The shock of the water was like a sledgehammer to the chest. The cold paralyzed her. The cold paralyzed her lungs for a terrifying second. Sienna forced herself to surface, gasping, her eyes stinging from the brackish salt water. She spotted the woman 5 yards away, barely keeping her head above the swells. "I've got you!" Sienna screamed, swimming with powerful strokes. She grabbed the woman by the collar of her coat. The woman was older, panic in her wide eyes, her silver hair plastered to her face. She was flailing, a natural reaction that usually drowned the rescuer. "Stop moving!" "Lean back," Sienna commanded, using her nurse voice, authoritative and calm. Miraculously, the woman listened. Sienna hooked her arm under the woman's shoulders, kicking hard toward the barnacle-encrusted ladder on the side of the pier. It took every ounce of strength she had. Her limbs felt like lead. The river wanted to keep them both. They reached the ladder. Sienna shoved the woman up first. "Climb!" They collapsed onto the wet wood of the pier, gasping, shivering violently. Sienna rolled onto her back, staring up at the rain-soaked sky, her chest heaving. The older woman crawled over to her. Despite being half-drowned, she moved with an elegance that defied the situation. She grabbed Sienna's hand. Her fingers were adorned with rings, massive diamonds, and sapphires that glinted in the dim streetlight. "You," the woman chattered, her teeth clicking together. "You saved Rosa." "We need hospital," Sienna managed to say, sitting up. She was freezing to death. Hypothermia was setting in. No! Rosa gripped her arm with surprising strength. No police! No ambulance, please! You almost died, Sienna argued. You need a doctor. I need a phone, Rosa insisted. She reached into her soaked coat pocket but pulled out nothing but a ruined, waterlogged iPhone. She cursed in Italian, Merda. Sienna sighed, her hand shaking as she pulled her own cheap Android phone from her waterproof bag, which she had luckily left on the pier deck before jumping. Here. I call 911. No. Rosa snatched the phone. I call my son. Only my son. Sienna watched, bewildered, as the shivering woman dialed a number from memory. She put the phone to her ear. Don Tal, Rosa said, her voice trembling but imperious. If Portio, Pier 4, they tried to kill me. A pause. Yes, I'm alive. A girl, she pulled me out. Rosa looked at Sienna, her dark eyes assessing, sharp and terrifyingly intelligent. Bring the car, Rosa whispered. And Dante? Bring the doctor. She hung up and handed the phone back to Sienna. My son is coming. He will fix this. Who tried to kill you? Sienna asked, the reality of the situation finally piercing through the adrenaline. That Mercedes speeding away, this wasn't an accident. Rosa didn't answer. She just reached out and touched Sienna's cheek. You have a kind face. It is a dangerous thing to have a kind face in this city. 10 minutes later, the roar of engines drowned out the storm. 3 black SUVs screeched onto the pier, surrounding them. Men in dark suits poured out, holding umbrellas, and Sienna's heart stopped. Were those guns? Bulges beneath their jackets suggested they were. A man stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was tall, easily over 6'3", wearing a bespoke 3-piece charcoal suit that cost more than Sienna's entire life earnings. He didn't use an umbrella. He walked straight into the rain, his dark hair slicked back, his face a mask of cold, terrifying fury. He went straight to Rosa, kneeling in a puddle without a second thought. Mama. I'm fine, Dante, Rosa said, though her lips were blue. She saved me. Dante Cavallo turned his head, Rosa said. Though her lips were blue, she saved me. Dante Cavallo. For the first time, Sienna met the eyes of the devil. They were gray, like the stormy sky, devoid of warmth, calculating and ruthless. He looked at her not with gratitude, but with suspicion. He scanned her wet scrubs, her shivering form, her cheap phone. Who are you? His voice was a low rumble, deep and smooth like whiskey over gravel. Sienna, she stammered. Sienna Miller. I saw her fall. Fall? Dante stood up, towering over her. My mother doesn't fall, Miss Miller. She was thrown. He snapped his fingers. 2 of the men stepped forward. Get my mother to Dr. Evans in the car, Dante ordered. Then he looked back at Sienna and put Miss Miller in the second vehicle. What? Sienna stepped back, her back hitting the railing. No, I'm going home. I saved her. You should be thanking me. Dante stepped into her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne, rain, and gun oil. He took her chin in his hand, tilting her face up. His thumb brushed her bottom lip, sending a jolt of electricity straight to her toes that she absolutely did not want to feel. I don't believe in coincidences, Sienna, he said softly. Nobody walks this pier at midnight unless they have business with Vittoria Shipping. Until I find out who threw my mother in that water, you aren't going anywhere. You're kidnapping me, she gasped. I'm securing a witness, Dante corrected. He gestured to his men. Take her. Before she could scream, a heavy jacket was thrown over her shoulders, and she was guided firmly into the back of the SUV. The lock clicked shut. As the convoy sped away, leaving the pier behind, Sienna realized with a sinking dread she hadn't saved a random old lady. She had just walked straight into the lion's den. The ride was silent, oppressively silent. Sienna sat in the middle row of the armored SUV, sandwiched between 2 men who looked like they chewed concrete for breakfast. The leather seats were heated, which should have been comforting, but Sienna couldn't stop shaking. They didn't take her to a police station. They didn't take her to a hospital. They drove out of the city, crossing the bridge into New Jersey, winding up a private road toward the cliffs of the Palisades. The car finally slowed as it approached a massive wrought iron gate. A camera flashed, the gates groaned open, and they pulled into the driveway of a sprawling estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. Stone walls, security cameras on every corner, and guards patrolling the grounds with Rottweilers. This was the Cavallo estate. The car stopped. The door opened. Out! One of the guards grunted. Sienna stepped out, her legs wobbling. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy mist in the air. She was led through the massive oak double doors into a foyer that was larger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and Renaissance-era paintings that Sienna was pretty sure belonged in a museum. She was marched into a study. The room smelled of old paper and cigars. A fire roared in the hearth. "Sit," a voice candid from the shadows. Dante was standing by the window, pouring amber liquid into a crystal glass. He had removed his wetsuit jacket, revealing a white dress shirt that clung to his broad shoulders. He turned, holding the glass out to her. "Drink? It's brandy. It will stop the shaking." Sienna didn't move. She stood by the velvet armchair, hugging her arms around herself. "I want to go home." Dante's eyes narrowed. He walked over and pressed the glass into her hand. "Drink?" It wasn't a suggestion. Sienna took a sip. The liquid burned her throat, but the warmth bloomed in her stomach. "My mother is stable," Dante said, leaning against his mahogany desk. "Dr. Evans says she swallowed some water, but her lungs are clear. She is resting." "I'm glad," Sienna said, her voice finding a little strength. "Now can I go?" Dante laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. "You still don't understand, do you? Someone tried to assassinate Rosa Cavallo tonight, and conveniently, a young nurse was there to pull her out. It wasn't convenient. I was walking home." "Why?" Dante shot back. "Why were you there?" "Because the bus was rerouted," Sienna yelled, frustration boiling over fear. "Because I'm broke, and I work double shifts, and I don't have a chauffeur to drive me around in a tank. I saw a woman dying, and I helped. If I wanted her dead, I would have let her drown." Dante studied her. He looked at her wet hair, her cheap scrubs, the defiant spark in her hazel eyes. He was used to people cowering before him. Senators, judges, rival gang leaders. They all looked at the floor when Dante Cavallo entered a room. But this girl, this little drowned rat of a nurse, she was looking him dead in the eye. He walked around the desk and picked up a file. Sienna Miller, age 24, registered nurse at St. Jude's, no criminal record, father deceased, mother in a care facility in Florida, debt $45,000 in student loans, $12,000 in credit card debt. Sienna went cold. "How did you get that?" Sienna went cold. "How dear? I have my ways. It took my analyst 5 minutes while we were in the car." Dante tossed the file onto the desk. "You need money, Sienna. Maybe someone offered you a payday? Maybe the plan was to save her, get in my good graces, and then plant a bug in my house? Or maybe slip poison into her tea while you played the hero?" "You're insane," Sienna whispered. "I don't even know who you are. I am the man who owns this city," Dante said simply. "And until I find the person who threw my mother off that pier, you belong to me." "Belong to you," Sienna scoffed, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Slavery was abolished a long time ago, Mr. Cavallo." "Not in my world." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send in Dominic." The door opened and a man walked in. He was older than Dante, with a scar running down his desk phone. "Send in Dominic." The door opened and a man walked in. He was older than Dante, with a scar running down his cheek and eyes that looked dead. This was Dominic. Dante's. "Dominic, Miss Miller will be staying in the East Wing," Dante said, never taking his eyes off Sienna. "She is not to leave the grounds. She is not to make phone calls without supervision. If she tries to run—" Dante paused, his gaze darkening. "Bring her back, unharmed, but make sure she understands the error of her ways." "Understood," Dominic nodded. "You can't do this," Sienna shouted. "I have a job. I have a life." "Your job has been notified that you are taking a leave of absence for a family emergency," Dante said smoothly. "Your rent has been paid for the next 6 months. Your debts, we are negotiating." Sienna stared at him, slack-jawed. "You paid my rent. I keep my assets secure. And right now, you are an asset, a witness. Dante walked toward her again, stopping inches away. The heat coming off him was intoxicating. Besides, he lowered his voice, my mother likes you. She requested that you attend to her recovery. You're a nurse, aren't you? I'm not your nurse, she spat. You are whatever I say you are, Dante replied. Suddenly, the door burst open. A younger man dressed in a flashy Gucci jacket ran in. He looked like a watered-down, less dangerous version of Dante. This was Luca, Dante's younger, more reckless brother. Dante, we found the car, Rico shouted, breathless. The Maybach, it was torched in Queens, but we got a plate before it. Dante's attention snapped away from Sienna instantly. The predator had found a scent, and it belongs to the Russo family, Luca said. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Sienna didn't know who the Russo family was, but she saw the change in Dante. The smooth, controlled businessman vanished. The killer emerged. Dante's jaw tightened. The Russos broke the truce. He turned back to Sienna. The look in his eyes had changed. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was possessiveness. Dominant, lock down the estate, Dante ordered. Code red, nobody in or out. The war has started. He looked at Sienna one last time. It seems your stay has been extended, Miss Miller. If the Russos know you saw them, you're a loose end. If I let you go, you'll be dead by morning. So you're protecting me? Sienna asked, confused. Dante smirked, a cruel, handsome twist of his lips. Don't flatter yourself, Piccola. I'm protecting my investment. You're the only one who can identify the driver. You're mine until I get a name. He gestured to Dominic. Take her to her room and get her some dry clothes. She looks ridiculous. As Sienna was led away, she glanced back. Dante was already on the phone, loading a silver pistol with practiced ease. He didn't look back. Sienna realized with terrifying clarity that she had jumped into the water to save a life, but she might have just signed her own death warrant. She was trapped in a mansion with a Mafia warlord who thought he owned her, and outside the gates an army was coming to kill them all. And the worst part? When he had touched her chin, when he had looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, she hadn't wanted to pull away. Sienna woke up in a bed that cost more than her college education. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, cool and impossibly soft against her skin. For a split second, she thought she was dreaming, floating in a cloud. Then, the memory of the freezing East River and the cold steel of Dante Cavallo's gun crashed back into her mind. She sat up, gasping. The room was massive, a master suite decorated in creams and golds with French doors leading out to a balcony. She rushed to the doors, twisting the handle. Locked. Of course, she was a prisoner in a palace. On the bedside table, a tray had been left. Wear these. Join my mother for breakfast in the solarium. Do not try the doors. The dogs haven't been fed yet. Beside the tray was a box wrapped in black ribbon. Inside, Sienna found a dress. It wasn't the kind of thing she wore. It was a Dolce & Gabbana midi dress, floral but dark, elegant, and severe. It fit her perfectly. The fact that he knew her size without asking made her skin crawl. Sienna dressed quickly, her anger building with every button she fastened. She was an ER nurse who pulled double shifts and dealt with gunshot victims and drug overdoses. She wasn't going to play house with a gangster. She found the door to the hallway unlocked. A guard, a mountain of a man named Rocco, was waiting outside. He didn't speak, he just gestured for her to follow. They walked through the silent corridors of the estate. The house felt like a museum, cold and imposing. They reached the solarium, a glass-walled room filled with exotic orchids and ferns. The morning sun filtered through the mist, illuminating Rosa Cavallo, who sat in a wheelchair by a round table. Rosa looked better. Her color had returned, though she looked frail. When she saw Sienna, her face lit up. "My savior," Rosa said, extending a hand. "Come, sit. The espresso is good. Dante imports the beans from a small roaster in Naples." Sienna sat, ignoring the coffee. "Mrs. Cavallo, I need to go home. You know this is wrong. He's keeping me here." Rosa sighed, placing her cup down on the saucer with a delicate clink. "Dante is difficult. He is a man of war, Sienna. He sees threats everywhere. And right now, the Russos are hunting. If you leave these gates, you are a target. Dante is possessive, yes, but he is also practical. He is keeping you alive. He threatened me, Sienna countered. He threatened the world to keep me safe, Rosa corrected gently. My husband, Bookcard, he'd me safe, Rosa corrected gently. Dante had to become a monster to survive him, but inside the monster, there is still a man, a lonely man. Sienna looked out the glass walls. In the distance, she saw Dante. He was down by the stables wearing a fitted black t-shirt and riding breeches, brushing a massive black stallion. The muscles in his back shifted and rippled as he worked. He looked different, Camer, less like a CEO of murder and more like a human being. He trusts no one, Rosa whispered. Into the inner sanctum, that means something. It means I'm a witness, Sienna said flatly. Perhaps. Rosa's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. Or perhaps he saw the way you jumped into the black water without hesitation. Men like Dante, they are used to women who want their money, their power. They have never met a woman who would risk her life for a stranger. Before Sienna could respond, the glass door slid open. Dante walked in. He had showered. His hair was wet, and he smelled of sandalwood and soap. He wore a crisp navy suit now, the armor back in place. Mother, he nodded, kissing Rosa's forehead. Then he turned his gray eyes to Sienna. He scanned her from head to toe, his gaze lingering on the curve of her waist in the dress he bought. The dress suits, he said, his voice of emotion, much better than the scrubs. I prefer the scrubs, Sienna said, lifting her chin. Dante's lip twitched almost to smile. He pulled out a chair and sat opposite her. Honesty is a luxury, Sienna, one I cannot afford today. The Russos are denying the hit. They claim the car was stolen. It's a lie, but a polite one. It buys us time. Time for what? Sienna asked. Time for you to remember, Dante said, leaning forward. The driver, think back to the pier. The window rolled down for a second before they sped off. You saw him. Sienna closed her eyes, trying to transport herself back to the rain, the cold, the adrenaline. It was dark. He had a hat, a baseball cap, red. Dante pulled a notepad from his pocket. Go on. He was heavy-set, thick neck, and he was smoking. I saw the cherry of the cigarette. Sienna frowned, concentrating. He had a tattoo on his hand, the one on the steering wheel. It looked like a spider or a star. Dante's pen stopped moving. The air in the room grew heavy. He exchanged a look with Rosa, a look of pure, unadulterated danger. A spider web, Dante said low. On the left hand. Yes, Sienna nodded. Between the thumb and finger. Dante slowly closed the notebook. His face had turned to stone. That isn't a Russo soldier. Who is it? Rosa asked, her voice trembling slightly. It's Silas Vane, Dante said. A freelancer. A freelancer proved to be Irish mobs in Hell's Kitchen. If Vane was driving, this wasn't a territory dispute. If Vane was driving to the territory, this was a paid contract. Dante stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. Someone paid a fortune to have my mother killed. Someone who wanted it to look like the Italians did it. He looked at Sienna. The intensity in his eyes was terrifying, but for the first time, it wasn't cold. It was burning. You just gave me the key to the war, he said. You stay in the house. Dominic is doubling the guard. Do not go near the windows. Dante, Sienna stood up, matching his height as best she could. If this Silas guy is a freelancer, he doesn't know me. I can leave. I can go to the police. Dante stepped into her space, crowding her against the table. He reached out, his hand wrapping around the back of her neck. His grip was firm, possessing, his thumb tracing the pulse that hammered in her throat. The police are on the payroll, Sienna, he murmured, his face inches from hers. If you walk into a precinct, you'll be dead before you fill out the paperwork. You are safer in this cage than you are in the wild. His eyes dropped to her lips. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Sienna forgot to breathe. She should push him away. She should slap him. But the heat radiating off him was magnetic. She felt a pull, a dark gravity dragging her toward him. Besides, Dante whispered, his voice rough. I haven't decided if I'm finished with you yet. He released her abruptly and stormed out of the solarium. Sienna collapsed back into her chair, her legs shaking. Be careful, child, Rosa said softly, watching her son leave. If you make him fall in love with you, you will not just be part of his world. You will be the center of it. And the center is where the bullets aim. The attack didn't happen at night. It happened at 2 p.m. under the bright gray sky of a Tuesday afternoon. Sienna was in the kitchen, arguing with the chef about the sodium content of Rosa's lunch when the world exploded. First, there was a strange thwip sound, like a whip cracking. Then, the expensive French window above the sink shattered, showering the granite countertop in diamonds of glass. The chef dropped a pan of marinara sauce. Get down! Sienna dove behind the kitchen island just as the automatic gunfire started. Rat-a-tat-tat! Bullets chewed into the mahogany cabinets, sending splinters flying. The noise was deafening. Code Black! Code Black! A voice screamed over the intercom. Sienna curled into a ball, covering her head. This wasn't a movie. This was loud, chaotic, and terrifying. She could hear shouting, the barking of the Rottweilers outside, and the return fire from Dante's guards. Suddenly, the kitchen door kicked open. Dominic, the consigliere, stumbled in, dragging a younger guard, Leo Pontier. Leo was screaming. His leg was a mess of blood. Cover fire! Dominic roared, firing a handgun blindly out the shattered window. He looked at Sienna, his eyes wide. Nurse, we need you! Fear vanished. Training took over. Sienna wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was a trauma nurse. She crawled across the floor, ignoring the glass cutting into her knees. Drag him here, behind the fridge. Sienna commanded. Dominic dragged Leo to safety. Sienna assessed the wound instantly. A high-caliber round had gone through Leo's thigh. The blood was bright red and spurting in a rhythmic jet. Femoral artery, Sienna shouted over the gunfire. He's going to bleed out in 2 minutes. I need a tourniquet. I don't have one, Dominic yelled, reloading his clip. Sienna looked around frantically. She spotted a silk dish towel hang on the oven handle and a wooden mixing spoon on the floor. Give me your belt, Sienna ordered Dominic. What? Net? Dominic unbuckled his heavy leather belt and threw it to her. Sienna wrapped it high around Leo's thigh above the wound. She cinched it tight, but it wasn't enough. She grabbed the wooden spoon, slid it under the leather, and twisted. Leo screamed, thrashing. Hold him down, Sienna yelled. Dominic pinned the boy's shoulders. Sienna twisted the spoon again and again, creating a windlass tourniquet. The spurting blood slowed to a trickle, then stopped. Keep pressure. Sienna grabbed a stack of clean kitchen towels and jammed them into the bullet hole, packing the wound. Suddenly, the firing stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise. Clear! A deep voice boomed from the hallway. Dante strode into the kitchen. He was holding an assault rifle, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with dirt and gunpowder. He looked like a god of war. He saw the scene, the shattered glass, the marinara sauce mixed with blood on the floor, and Sienna kneeling in the center of it all, her hands deep inside a man's leg, her face splattered with red. She wasn't crying, she was working. Dante lowered his weapon. He walked over, his eyes locked on her. Is he alive? Dante asked. I stopped the bleeding, Sienna said, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. But he needs a surgeon. Now the adrenaline was fading. If I let go of this tourniquet, he dies. Dante tapped his earpiece. Bring the chopper around back. Medevac for Leo. Now. He knelt beside Sienna. He didn't look at his soldier. He looked at her. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped a speck of blood from her cheek. You did good, he said softly. There were 3 of them, Dominic reported, breathless. They breached the west wall. We got 2. 1 ran. Find him, Dante said, his voice ice cold. Skin him. The medical team arrived minutes later, taking Leo from Sienna's hands. As soon as the pressure was off, Sienna slumped back against the refrigerator, her hands trembling violently. She looked at her palms. They were coated in crimson. She felt bile rise in her throat. She scrambled to the sink and dry heaved. She felt a large, warm hand on her back. Dante, breathe, he instructed, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He turned the faucet on, testing the water temperature, then took her hands in his. He washed them. He used a bar of lemon soap, scrubbing the blood from her fingernails with a gentleness that contradicted the violence he had just commanded. Sienna watched the pink water swirl down the drain. They came here to kill us. They came to send a message, Dante said, drying her hands with a clean towel. Silas Vane, he works for whoever pays the most. Someone is trying to start a war between me and the Russos. Who? I don't know yet, Dante admitted. He turned her around so she was facing him. He placed his hands on the counter on either side of her, boxing her in. The kitchen was a wreck, destroyed by bullets, but in that small space between them, the air was electric. You saved one of my men today, Dante said. You aren't just a witness anymore, Sienna. You're part of the crew. My men, they will die for you now. I don't want anyone to die for me, Sienna whispered. I just want to go home. You have no home out there, Dante said darkly. Not anymore. Vane knows you're here. If you leave, he finishes the job. He leaned closer. His forehead rested against hers. She could feel his erratic heartbeat against her chest. He was just as adrenalized as she was. I tried to fight it, Dante murmured, his voice dropping to a growl. I tried to see you as just a leverage piece, a pawn. And now, Sienna dared to ask, her breath hitching. Now, Dante's hand moved up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her lips. Now I look at you covered in my soldier's blood, standing in the wreckage of my kitchen, and all I can think is that you are the most beautiful, dangerous thing I have ever seen. He didn't give her a chance to run. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fueled by the brush with death. It tasted of danger and undeniable passion. Sienna's hands bunched into his shirt, pulling him closer. For a moment, she forgot he was a criminal. She forgot the kidnapping. She only felt the man who made her feel more alive in this war zone than she ever had in her safe, quiet life. Dante pulled back, breathless, his gray eyes blown wide. He looked almost angry at himself. Go to your room, he commanded, his voice rough. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. He turned and walked away, stepping over the broken glass, shouting orders into his radio. Sienna stood there, her lips burning, her heart racing. She realized with a terrified thrill that Rosa was right. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She was falling for the jailer. But as she walked back to her room, passing the shattered window, she saw something on the floor. It was a shell casing, but not from the attacker's guns. It was from Dominic's gun. She picked it up. It was etched with a symbol. A tiny, laser-engraved spider web. Sienna froze. The symbol she had described to Dante, the tattoo on the hitman's hand, was a spider web. She had told Dante it was a tattoo, but now, holding the casing, a memory flashed back. The driver on the pier didn't have a tattoo. He was wearing gloves. The spider web wasn't on his skin. It was on the steering wheel cover. But Dominic had a scar on his hand, a scar that looked like a web. And this bullet casing, why would Dominic, Dante's right hand, use custom rounds that matched the symbol of the hitman? Sienna looked down the hall where Dominic was limping away, patting Dante on the back. The call wasn't coming from outside the house. The betrayal was standing right next to the king. Dante was hunting a ghost named Silas Vane, but the real snake was sleeping in his den. Sienna clutched the casing in her fist. If she told Dante, would he believe her? Dominic was his brother in arms. She was just the girl from the river. But if she didn't tell him, Dante was going to die. The shell casing burned a hole in Sienna's pocket. For 3 hours, she sat in her room staring at the silk wallpaper, her mind racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the scene in the kitchen, the blood, the shattered glass, and Dante's lips on hers. You are the most beautiful, dangerous thing I have ever seen. He was falling for her, and she, God help her, was falling for him. But the man he trusted with his life, Dominic, was plotting to end his. Sienna paced the floor. She needed more than a shell casing, A casing was circumstantial. Dominic could claim he picked it up from the attackers or that someone stole his ammo to frame him. She needed concrete proof. She needed a smoking gun. At 7 p.m., a maid arrived with dinner. Mr. Cavallo requests your presence in the library, Miss Miller. But the maid lowered her voice. He is in a foul mood. The War Council is meeting. Is Dominic there? Sienna asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, miss, they all are. This was it. If the War Council was meeting in the library, that meant Dominic's quarters located in the renovated carriage house attached to the west wing would be empty. Sienna waited until the maid left. She changed out of the dress and back into a fresh set of scrubs she had requested for medical comfort. They were quiet, practical, and allowed her move. She slipped out of her room. The hallway was empty. Most of the guards were perimeter-focused after the afternoon attack. She moved like a ghost, sticking to the shadows of the massive pillars. She reached the connecting corridor to the carriage house. It was darker here, the air smelling of old leather and gun oil. Dominic's door was at the end of the hall, locked. She cursed silently. She looked around. A potted fern sat next to the door. She lifted the pot, nothing. She checked the top of the door frame, nothing. She knelt down to pick the lock, a trick she'd learned from a delinquent ex-boyfriend years ago. When she noticed the keypad, it was digital. She was screwed. Then she remembered the kitchen. When Dominic had unbuckled his belt to give to her for the tourniquet, he had dropped a small key fob. Sienna had kicked it under the fridge in the chaos. She hadn't thought about it until now. She sprinted back to the kitchen. It was taped off, a crime scene, but empty. She dropped to her stomach, reaching under the massive sub-zero refrigerator. Her fingers brushed against dust bunnies, glass shards, and then cool plastic. She grabbed the fob, running back to the carriage house, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She pressed the fob against the scanner. Beep! Green light. Sienna slipped inside and closed the door softly. Dominic's room was sparse, almost military. A single bed, a rack of weights, and a massive oak desk cluttered with maps of the city. Sienna started searching. She checked the drawers, nothing but ammo and cigars. She checked under the mattress. She checked the closet. Come on, she whispered, panic rising. You're a traitor. Where do you keep your secrets? She went back to the desk. She ran her hands under the wood. There was a slight ridge, a false bottom. She grabbed a letter opener and pried at the wood. It popped open. Inside, there wasn't a gun. There was a ledger and a burner phone. Sienna opened the ledger. It was filled with dates and amounts, large sums of money. But it wasn't the numbers that made her blood freeze. It was the names of the clients, the Russo family, the Irish mob, Victoria Shipping, Internal Skim. Dominic wasn't just working for the Russos. He was stealing from Dante and selling secrets to everyone. He was dismantling the Cavallo empire from the inside out to build his own retirement fund. She picked up the burner phone. It was dead. She pressed the power button, praying it had charge. It flickered to life. 4% battery. She went to the messages. The most recent one was from today, 1:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the attack. Outgoing, kitchen window is the weak point. Security rotation shifts at 2. Aim for the girl first. She knows too much. If the boss gets in the way, take him too. I'll finish him if you miss. Sienna gasped, covering her mouth. Dominic had ordered the hit, and he had specifically targeted her. The bullet that hit Leo was meant for her head, and the last sentence, I'll finish him if you miss. Ha ha ha! Dominic was planning to kill Dante tonight. She pulled out her own phone to take pictures of the screen, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice. Snap, 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 snap. She heard heavy footsteps in the corridor. Voices. I'll get the files from my room, boss. Give me 2 minutes. It was Dominic. Sienna's eyes widened. She shoved the phone and ledger back into the hidden compartment and slammed the false bottom shut. She looked for a place to hide. The closet was too far. The bed was too low. The bathroom? She dove into the small ensuite bathroom and pulled the door almost shut, leaving a tiny crack. She climbed into the shower stall, pulling the pane door beep and opened. Dominic walked in. He was humming a chilling, cheerful tune. Sienna held her breath, tears of terror stinging her eyes. She heard him walk to the desk. He shuffled some papers. Then, silence. Why was it silent? "I know you're in here," Dominic's voice called out. It wasn't loud. It was amused. Sienna didn't move. "You smell like vanilla and hospital soap, Miss Miller," Dominic said. "You left the key fob on my desk." Sienna looked down. In her haste, she had left the fob right on top of the maps. The bathroom door was kicked open. Dominic stood there holding a silenced pistol. He smiled, but his eyes were dead. "You really are a nuisance," he sighed. "I was hoping the Irish boys would take you out this afternoon. Would have saved me the trouble." "Dante will kill you," Sienna said, her voice trembling but defiant. She stepped out of the shower, hands raised. "He knows. I sent him the photos. It was a lie." "She hadn't had time," Dominic chuckled. "No, you didn't. There's no signal in this room. Faraday's cage in the walls prevents wiretaps." He stepped closer, the gun leveled at her chest. "But don't worry. I'm not going to shoot you here. Too messy. Dante is waiting in the library. I think it's time we go see him. But we're going to tell the story my way." The walk to the library felt like a funeral procession. Dominic walked behind her, the gun pressed firmly into the small of her back, hidden by his jacket. "One word," Dominic whispered in her ear, "and I blow your spine out. You'll be paralyzed before you hit the floor." "Keep walking." They entered the library. It was a grand, dark room filled with smoke. Dante sat behind his desk, looking exhausted. His brother Luca was pouring a drink. When Dante saw Sienna, his face softened for a fraction of a second. He stood up. "Sienna? What are you doing here?" "I told you to stay in your room. She has something to confess, boss," Dominic said, his voice dripping with false sorrow. He shoved Sienna forward. She stumbled, catching herself on a leather armchair. "Confess." Dante frowned, his gaze shifting from Dominic to Sienna. "What is going on?" "I found her in my office," Dominic said, pulling the burner phone out of his pocket, the one Sienna had found. "She was trying to plant this." "That's a lie," Sienna screamed. "It's his. I found it in his desk. He ordered the hit, Dante. He's working with the Russos." Dante looked at the phone in Dominic's hand. Then he looked at the phone in Dominic's hand. Then he looked at Sienna. "Dominic, explain." "I've had my suspicions since the pier," Dominic said calmly, walking over to Dante's desk. "This was too clean, boss. She accidentally saves your mother? The Russos just happened to be there. I did some digging into her finances." Dominic threw a file onto the desk. "Deposit transfer logs." Dominic threw a tast. Dante opened the file. Sienna watched, confused. "Today at 10 a.m., Dominic pointed. "Her student loans, paid in full, $45,000. Trace the source." Dante's eyes scanned the paper. His expression hardened. "Shell Company. Cayman Islands, linked to the Russo holdings." Sienna felt the blood drain from her face. "What? No, you said you paid them. You told me in the study." "I said I was negotiating," Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low timbre. He looked up at her. The warmth was gone. The gray eyes were now Arctic ice. "I hadn't authorized the payment yet." "I didn't take their money," Sienna pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Dominic is framing me. He has a ledger. He's stealing from you. The ledger she tried to plant." Dominic shook his head. "Sienna, give it up. The Russos paid you to get inside. She staged the rescue, signaled them today to attack the kitchen. That's why you were there, right? To open the window." "I was making tea." "You were opening a breach," Dominic corrected. "And when the attack failed, you saved Leo to keep your cover intact. You're a very good actress." Dante walked around the desk. He moved slowly, like a predator circling prey. He stopped in front of Sienna. "I let you into my home," Dante said softly. "I let you touch my mother. I let you—" To stop, his jaw clenching. He was thinking of the kiss, the moment of vulnerability he had given her. "Dante, please." Sienna reached for his hand. "Look at me. You know who I am. You felt it." I'm not a spy. I'm just a nurse. Dante recoiled from her touch as if she were acid. You weren't a nurse, he spat. You art a whore for the enemy. The word hung in the air like a slap. Sienna flinched. Dante turned his back on her. Dominic, get her out of my sight. Sienna flinched. Dante turned his back on her. Dominic, get her out of my sight. Sienna flinched, drifting his gun. Dante paused. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He was vibrating with rage, but beneath it, Sienna saw the flicker of pain. He wanted to kill her, but he couldn't. No, Dante said hoarsely. If you kill her, we start a war tonight. And my mother, she is fond of her. He turned back to Sienna one last time. Get out, he commanded. Leave the estate. If I ever see your face in New York again, I will cut your throat myself. Dante, he's going to kill you, Sienna screamed as Dominic grabbed her arm. He's the spider. Check the shell casings. Dominic uses the spider web rounds. Enough, Dante roared, slamming his hand on the desk. Get her out. Dominic dragged her from the room. Sienna fought, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. He hauled her through the foyer, past the silent guards who looked at her with disgust, and out the front door. The rain had started again. Dominic dragged her all the way to the front gates. He punched in the code, and the iron gates swung open. He threw her onto the wet asphalt of the road. Sienna scraped her hands on the pavement, gasping. She looked up. Dominic was standing inside the gate, sheltered by an umbrella. He was smiling. You should have taken the money and run, sweetheart, Dominic said. Sienna sobbed. He's smarter than you. Maybe shrugged. Dominic said, but by the time he figures it out, I'll be the capo, and he'll be a memory. Goodbye, Sienna. The gate slammed shut. The lock clicked. Sienna was alone. It was dark. The road was deserted. She had no coat, no phone, no money. She was miles from the city, standing in the pitch black of the New Jersey Palisades. She stood up, shivering violently. She had to get to a police station. She had to warn Dante, even if he hated her. She started walking down the winding road. Headlights appeared in the distance. A van was coming up the hill. Sienna waved her arms. Help, please, help. The van slowed down. It was a gray cargo van, nondescript. It pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. You look lost, miss, the driver said. I need a phone, Sienna chattered. Please. Sure thing. The side door of the van slid open. Before Sienna cottered, please. The side door of the van slid open. Before Sienna could react, two men in ski masks jumped out. She read, but she was exhausted and barefoot. They grabbed her, clapping a rag over her mouth. The smell of chloroform filled her nose. As her vision faded to black, she saw the driver's hand on the steering wheel. He wasn't wearing gloves this time. There, tattooed in black ink between his thumb and forefinger, was a spider web. It wasn't Dominic. Dominic was the inside man. But this was Silas Vane, the freelancer. Dominic was the inside man, but this was Silas Vane, the freelancer. Sienna's world went dark. She had been cast out of the lion's den, only to be fed to the wolves. The silence in the library was suffocating. Dante poured a drink, his hand trembling, telling himself he had done what was necessary to protect the family. You are a fool, Dante. Rosa wheeled herself into the room, her eyes burning. That girl jumped into a freezing river for me. And when you threw her out, she didn't beg for her life. She begged you to save yourself. Dante froze. The memory of Sienna's desperate scream surfaced. Check the shell casings. Dominic uses spiderweb rounds. He slammed his glass down and sprinted to the armory. He punched in the override code for Dominic's locker. Inside, stacked neatly, were boxes of custom hollow point ammunition. Dante held a single round under the light. Laser-etched into the brass was a tiny, intricate spider web. The room spun. Sienna hadn't lied. Dominic was the architect of the chaos, framing her to cover his own treason. And Dante had just handed her over to him. Luca! Dante roared, grabbing an assault rifle. Get the men, we're going to the Newark shipyards. If she has a single scratch on her, I will burn this city to ash. In the hollowed-out warehouse, Sienna was tied to a metal chair, her face bruised. Dominic checked his watch while Silas Vane, the hitman, Ruthless, Russo's will be here in 5 minutes. They pay me, they take you, and I disappear. He's coming, Sienna rasped, lifting her head, and he's going to kill you. Dante thinks you're a traitor. Dominic laughed. He's probably celebrating. Suddenly, the metal bay doors exploded inward. A black SUV rammed through the entrance, debris flying everywhere. From the smoke, Dante emerged, firing with robotic precision. Silas Vane dropped instantly, 2 rounds to the chest. Kill him. Drambing behind a forklift, Silas Vane dropped in, purged, firing with a robotic precision. Realizing he was outgunned, he grabbed Sienna, hauling her up as a human shield, his gun pressed to her temple. "Drop it, Dante," Dominic yelled, "or I paint the wall with her brains." Dante froze. He stood 20 feet away, his weapon raised, but he couldn't take the shot. He slowly lowered his rifle and kicked it away. "Let her go, Dom," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "Take me instead. You want to be the boss. Kill the boss, but let her walk." "Deal," Dominic grinned, shifting his aim from Sienna to Dante's heart. "Goodbye, brother. Ban, the gunshot echoed. But Dante didn't fall. Dominic's eyes went wide. He looked down to see a red flower blooming on his own chest. He collapsed, revealing Sienna behind him. She had dislocated her thumbs to slip the ropes and grabbed Vane's dropped pistol from the floor. Her hands shook, but her aim had been true. Dante rushed forward, kicking the gun away and falling to his knees. "Sienna!" "I told you," she whispered, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "I told you I wasn't the traitor." "I know," Dante choked out, cutting her remaining bonds. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I'm sorry, I thought I lost you." "You came for me," she said softly. "I will always come for you," Dante swore, pressing her hand to his beating heart. "I said you belonged to me. I belong to you." He scooped her up, carrying her out of the warehouse as Luca and the cleanup crew arrived. The war was over. The traitor was dead. And as Dante carried her into the rain, Sienna knew that the girl who saved the dragon's mother had finally tamed the dragon himself. And that is how a simple nurse from Brooklyn became the queen of the New York underworld. Sienna Miller didn't just survive the Mafia, she conquered it, not with bullets, but with a heart brave enough to save her enemies and strong enough to forgive the man she loved. Dante Cavallo learned the hard way that trust is the most expensive luxury in the world, and he nearly paid for it with the love of his life. But in the end, they found their way back to each other amidst the wreckage. Now, I have a question for you guys. If you were Sienna, could you have forgiven Dante for kicking you out and believing the lies? Or would you have walked away forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of danger, betrayal, and dark romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy thriller coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.